What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Paige with the Page, and today I want to do my June wrap up. Hello my darlings, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be talking through all the books that I read in June. I didn't put my hand up to co-host the amazing Readathon again this year because last year, chaos up here. But I decided I was going to participate and she did! Oh my god. This is the best reading month I have had this year. The spontaneity of the prompts, trying to work them in to having a fairly open TBR whilst having some mandatory reads was just what I needed. I apologise for the fact that I look like a burglar. I'm fucking cold. So, just thought I'd address that. I am in utter shock about how much I read and so happy that I did. I also had mum come up for a week, which normally I don't read too often or as much when she's around, but still managed to keep things flowing. So we didn't watch a movie, which we have done for every month prior, but that's okay. And I continue working on cross stitch. But I read 14 books, which is definitely on the upper scale of what I can physically read in a month. But I read 5,540 pages. The stack in the thumbnail is with replacement books for the ones that I didn't physically have, and that's still missing 150 pages worth of pages off of it. What? What? Also, I will leave Bree's channel from 4 Paws and a Books down below. They were the creator and host of the amazing Readathon, which is thank them for the stats. So my average pages per day was 185, which again, I think it's the highest it's been this year. February was 182, and my pages per book was 396, which is the second largest pages per book. Breaking that down, I had 2 books that were in the hundreds page range, 2 in the 200s, 4 in the 300s, 3 in the 400s, that doesn't hurt my brain at all, 1 in the 500s, and 2 in the 700s. And my 400 page books were, I think, leaning closer to almost 500 pages. My average rating was a 4.5. What? How? Who? How? I read 1 contemporary, 10 fantasy, 1 horror, 1 manga, and 1 romance. I listened to 5 books purely through audio. I read 1 physically, and I had 8 audio physical combinations. I was just looking at that. I'm like, the math does math, but math does math. I read 3 middle grade, 4 young adults, no new adults, and 7 adult. There were ones that were very much teetering on the edge of new adult, but the rest of the series was more young adult, and this was the conclusion, which is why they've aged. They're grown up that little bit more, but I decided to keep it to young adult. I had 4 4 stars, 6 4.5 stars, and 4 5 stars. I read 1 standalone. I started 3 new series. I continued in 3. I caught up on 1 and I finished 6. What the fuck? What the actual holy Jesus happened in June? I don't know. And I started some series that I've been very excited for or were contributing to challenges. My biggest book was Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, and that was 766 pages. And my smallest book was Hellsing Volume 3 by Kota Hirano, which was 164. And my listening hours was 75.5 hours. Nearly doubled the amount of my previous higher months. What? Like, I know I took up cross stitch and I'm working on a project, but holy dooly. Also, I want to thank Bert and Emma in the Whodunit Discord because we've been doing dice sprints most nights in June. We're in July. No, what month are we in? Who am I? And then Emma on the weekends was holding me accountable to actually read on that when I was available. So that was really, really lovely. And I genuinely don't think I would have got as much read without them. So with that existential crisis aside, let's talk about books. I don't know how much detail I'm gonna go into this because just who I am as a person, and I'm finding wrap-ups a little bit difficult and knowing that this is quite an extensive list. So apologies if this is rather brief, but I will give you what they are. The first book that I read was the perfect choice, and that is Blood on the Tide by Katie Robert, and I gave this 5 stars. Holy mother of sweet lord. The dynamic between, I remember it's Lizzie, because Lizzie has me in a bloody chokehold. Maeve, that's right. Well, I have one series that has a protagonist of Maeve, and very different dynamic to this Maeve. I love Katie Robert. I can see that the series is definitely getting bigger and we are going to explore more than just muddy scenes, but holy dooly, I just love the way that she writes characters. They nestle into my heart or have me in a chokehold, and I'm fine with either way. You know, there is a joy to not being sure if you want to be them or be with them, but every Katie Robert character just works. They're beautiful little cinnamon rolls, or they're vicious and, I imagine, in stilettos. This is the second in the Crimson Tales series, the first being Hunt on Dark Waters, and it is following the vampire ex-girlfriend from our protagonist in the first book and another crew member, Selkie, who has lost her skin. And we definitely are looking more into the wider world and the dynamics that are going on with the policymakers, and I think things are definitely going to progress throughout this series. It is always fundamentally going to be about the relationships first and foremost. The plot is not why I go into Katie Robert. It's still there, but I'm here to see their relationship dynamic and how that grows throughout the story. And again, she just nails it for me. The next book that I read was The Kiss Quo by Helen Huang, and I ended up giving this a 4.5. I can appreciate that there are Own Voices reviewers who found that the autism rep was not well done, and you can definitely see that it is Helen Huang's exploration in understanding this and sort of relaying their own awkward experiences without really understanding why they're like this. And I could see that, but it didn't affect my overall enjoyment. I think there might have been one or two things that I was like, oh, please, no, don't do that to me. But then a lot of them were just also painfully relatable in a lot of ways. I just really appreciated how Stella went about to learn. I do definitely think that Michael should have had that little bit more awareness earlier in the piece, especially for the way that she navigates things instead of taking it personally, but I understand that we're people. But it was interesting. It was interesting. There was one particular character dynamic that just, oh, I was so uncomfortable when it was revealed. But I appreciate that that was the reality of the situation in a fictional tale, but I could see it happening in real life. I think one thing I struggled with is the use of Asperger's, just because that's not something that I align with, but I know that people with Asperger's still hold that for their own expression. For me, I just lean more towards autism, but that's totally fine. I really liked their dynamic, the way that they navigated things. Again, always wish there was that little bit more clearer communication out of the gate, but the plot wouldn't happen if they did. I thought that Stella was a beautifully bright character, and I understood, the family dinner scene little too well, and I can appreciate that she just wanted to learn. There was an area that she wasn't familiar with and went to find a solution to that problem. It really surprised me because I know that not everyone loves this series, so I'm hesitant to put it on my list because I'm not sure if I do end up wanting to get to the Bride Test or the Heart Principle. I know that the Heart Principle is definitely a lot harder hitting, more contemporary leaning than romance, but knowing that going in, I think I'll be okay. I'm not 100% sure. But this, I had a glorious time with, and I'm very surprised. Next up, I picked up the last book, Wanderer, which is the 6 Pages & Co. book by Anna James, and gave this 5 stars. I adored where this went. It was so beautiful, it was so wholesome, just them trying to navigate people being mean. I think that Anna James really managed to weave all of our loose ends together. I do wish there had been more involvement for some really backseat characters in this story, but overall it's just a wonderful whimsical middle grade that is all about books, stories, narrative, and exploring that in this one in particular, about how whilst books are objects that have captured imagination, books didn't always exist. Stories have been around since before the invention of books, and that just, ooh, as someone that loves stories and narrative and expressing ourselves, those bits of commentary were just, yes! And I had a really, really lovely time with it. I also really enjoyed the elements of mythology that's now woven in as well. Next up, I read Darling by Kay Ankrum and gave this a 4.5. I don't want to say much about this. I know that it doesn't have the highest average rating, but just Kay Ankrum writes so beautifully for me. This had me nauseated, captivated. It was one of those that I picked it up at the very right time and needed to just sit with the story. It blew my mind and I loved it for that. It's a very diverse cast. It's got queer rep in it, which I really, really appreciated. I can't say too much because I genuinely think that just knowing this is a Peter Pan story is enough, but it is not a fantasy Peter Pan retelling. So yeah, I need more people to have the same reaction that I have had, but I don't think many people will. But it just, oh lordy, oh man, I got punched in the feelings. It was great. The 0.5 was more to do just with some components of having to suspend my disbelief and with teenagers and lack of parental involvement sort of thing. I'm like, really? Okay. Next up, I read Hellsing Volume 3 by Kota Hirano, and I gave this a 4 stars. I'm still very much enjoying it, but having no idea what the fuck I'm reading half the time, which I think is right. There is a lot of action in this manga. There is a lot of violence and gore, but it's interesting. It's one of those series that I know I'm very keen to keep reading and picking up the next volumes because I'm curious to see where it goes. I also just have no idea where it's going to go. I have a vague idea of the war and who we are fighting against, but also it could turn at the drop of a hat. So I'm very much on the edge of my seat every time I read these, and I'm not the best to deal with gore and all of that. It is not my favorite thing to look at. It is definitely unsettling while I'm reading this and I'm just sitting there going, oh sweet Lord in heaven help me. But I do really enjoy the characters. I enjoy seeing how everything works together and the different systems that are in play and the elements of the vampires and how their magic is presented. But dear God, I need Jesus after this. Next up, for BookStara, I read Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, and I ended up giving this a 4.5. I think the discussion that we have, I will also have a vlog going out talking through this and 2 other books as well, although I haven't edited the 2 other books, so I don't think I have as coherent thoughts or as in-depth as this, but holy dooly, I think the discussion also covers a lot of where my half rating was, because the pacing for this, there are time jumps in it which I know they are necessary, but I don't think the groundwork was laid in the previous chapters to allow for that and us feel that same level of connection or understanding for where we're actually at when we do jump forward. So it was jarring in that capacity, but holy mother of sweet Jesus, it made me cry, made me feel, made me jump up and down with excitement and then get pissed because that character did things, and I still think Hilo's a misogynistic prick and will go to my grave defending that. It's great. I had a glorious time. You know when a book hurts you on such a fundamental level? That was this. And I really appreciate it for it. Having been the last in a trilogy, I'd really grown to know and love these characters. We did get introduced to a few more, but overall I was falling back into characters that I was very familiar with and very excited to see where it went. Next up, for Amazing Readathon, I had to do a poll, so thank you to the Sufferathon guests for picking the beautiful What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is the first in the Sworn Soldiers series, and I am holding off till I get at least a release date for the 3rd one, and or just a little bit more information on it. Damn! This was a 5-star read that took me so much by surprise. I love T. Kingfisher's writing. I'm finding that whatever I pick up, it is a 4-star minimum, but this isn't going to be for everyone because it's mushroom horror or fungus horror, and that sounds really unappealing. And it was really, really disturbing to read. There were scenes in here that had me going, oh sweet Lord in heaven, I'm not going to survive this. But it just nailed it. I believe, yeah, this was the Fall of the House of Usher. I haven't ever read that story, but in and of itself, I don't feel like I missed anything crucial by not knowing that backstory. I just went in as this is its own story. And whilst it's short, it packs a goddamn punch. It stands by itself in its capabilities and its narrative. The soldiers and their formation was really interesting to hear about, so I'm curious to see where the 2nd and 3rd end up going and who we're following, but I don't want to know much more. And yeah, we're just going to this home of the ashes and shit's going down. Please, for the love of God, if you are squeamish about animals, do not read this. Just don't put yourself through it. But if you can handle mushrooms and rabbits, have fun. Holy shit. I really want Ash to read this, but I don't think I'm going to put him through that because he may never pick up a book again. What they find there is a nightmare of fungal growths and possessed wildlife surrounded in a dark, pulsing lake. Madeline sleepwalks and speaks in strange voices at night, and her brother Roderick is consumed with a mysterious malady of the nerves. Fabulous. The reveal just, shook me to my core. It was just one of those ones that just, oh lordy. Next up, I ended up reading The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden, and I gave this 4 stars. I did this book a disservice of not really remembering and or caring about The Bear and the Nightingale. I know that I rated it highly when I did read it, but I'd put this off. I'd procrastinated on it because I knew I didn't remember much, and I just decided, fuck it, let's just go in and see. So trying to remember who people were was an interesting choice on my part. It's one of those ones that you're exploring so many different elements of a particular era, and I think that Catherine Arden really handles it beautifully. I'm just finding I'm not connecting to the characters as much as I would like to. I lean more towards some characters over others, but overall I don't remember too much of the story once I finished it. I don't think I'm reading it too quickly or not able to comprehend it because I do remember components to it. I just don't know where we're going. There's obviously the purpose and we've laid the foundations, but I feel like this lent more into middle book syndrome of having its own arc, its own chaos incarnate, creating its own different dynamics and relationships between people to progress the plot. But how that's actually going to shape up in the third one would definitely let me know where this series lies for me. I know that it is absolutely beloved and I know a lot of people love it, so it's more just a me thing, I think. I do find I can struggle with historical books where it's leaning more historical with fantasy elements rather than fantasy elements set in like a medieval historical period. Once I got into it, I'd say it was probably on like day 3 I was into it, and from there it wasn't too hard to finish it off, but definitely getting back into it with so much time passed from reading the first one and not giving myself a recap had bearing on it. So 4 stars, but definitely more a me problem than a book problem. But the world in this, beautiful. The way that everything is described, stunning. Next up, I read The Shadow Glass by Rin Chapeko, and this is the 3rd in the Bone Witch trilogy, and again, in the vlog with Jade Legacy. I ended up giving it a 4.5. This series has been so interesting for me because I know a lot of people get very confused and don't like the series, or, you know, wish it had more of X, Y, and Z. But for me, I'm loving it. I loved the magic in it. I loved the characters. The timeline elements to it didn't hurt my noggin, which genuinely surprises the fuck out of me because I can't hold track of 1 timeline, let alone 2. Don't know how we managed to get through this, but we did. And I ended up giving it a 4.5. I really think it was a solid conclusion to the trilogy. It wrapped up nicely. There were nods to various components throughout the first and second, and then the ending just sits in my heart. So Tia just, she's one of those characters that you can tell she's trying to do things for the right reasons, but going about it not so quite right. You just want her to succeed. You want her to do what's best because you know in the end what she is doing is best for everyone, just not those that are in a position of power. So very much an underdog character, but I loved it. I really had such a good time with it. Again, I think there was a little bit of fodder in this one. It wasn't as condensed, which is funny because it's shorter than the second one, but that's fine. And we just spent a little bit going around in a circle, and then we continued on and it was from the swing up there. So that's why it was a 4.5, not a 5-star, but oh my god, I'm surprised by how much I love this series and how much I love these characters, so I'm not mad at it. The next book that I read was Every Gift a Curse by Caroline O'Donoghue, and that was the 3rd and final book in the gift series, first being All Our Hidden Gifts. And that's not technically in the vlog. I didn't intentionally mean to finish it this month, but I did. So, whoops. For this one I gave it a 4 stars. I found that the first one I really enjoyed. I loved Maeve's character and her coming into herself and her magic. The second one we dotted around a little bit, and this one again I just found Maeve's character very annoying. Whereas the first one, I didn't find her to be so annoying, but a lot of people have said they've read read the first book and gone, nah, the protagonist's too annoying, I can't do it. I'm like, okay, that's fair. I know that she was teenage angsty, but I don't know. I just found it was grating by the end, unfortunately. I really enjoyed where the story went and how it all wrapped up. Absolutely just holy dooly. But it also left me wanting a little bit more, which is not how I really want to end a series. Like, I'm happy with Jade Legacy and Shadowglass being a 4.5 because they have wrapped up all their tales. Whereas this, it just didn't quite stick the landing as well as the others. And whilst I really enjoyed it, I saw the progression. I was on the edge of my seat for components of it because there is this mystery element to it. There was also just a little bit too much angst for me to be able to deal with. So that's how I landed for that one. The next book that I read was Physique by Angie Sage, and this is the third in the Septimus Heap series. And I'm really loving this series. I'm so surprised at just how beautiful it is. It was so easy to read this because it is a middle grade with illustrations, and it's just a fun time. I felt that this went on an interesting twist, and you weren't, I don't know, sometimes I find with middle grade series, it's the same narrative just told in a different setting sort of thing. Whereas for this, it really took twists and turns. So there was this element of concern for the characters. It's, how is this going to shape up? You gotta love absentee parents. It makes me giggle so much, especially in these sort of middle grade books, because these kids are just running around doing what they can to be the best people that they can be, and their parents are in an attic playing with, I think, ants. I'm not 100% sure on that one though, as you do. I just really enjoyed where Septimus's character ended up and the things that he learnt and how we got to learn more of the magic, where it's coming from, and each new element that we add into the story is making it very interesting. I am very curious for each element being the main focus and Physique being Septimus's training now. I'm very excited to continue with this series and ended up giving it a 4.5. It wasn't as strong as the other two or had that same sort of nostalgic effect, but I still really, really love it. It sort of gives me Fitz vibes with less torture, but that sort of magical homely feeling, which is what I get from Rob and Hob. I just get a lot more pain in Hob than I'm gonna get in this, thank God. Next up, I read The Lighthouse at the World's End by Amy Sparks, and this is the fourth and final book in the House at the Edge of Magic's series. These titles are a goddamn mouthful. I love this. 5 stars. Oh my god. This has the same vibes for me, the same sort of heart, compassion, joy, feel-goodness that the Widdersham sisters has for me. The whole series has just been delightful. We have Nine, who's an orphan who pickpockets a house at the edge of magic, and the first 3 are definitely getting to learn about the world, learn about magic, and just learn about family and friendship, whereas this one is tying that all together, and it was done really beautifully. Just have to appreciate this series as a whimsical middle grade. I love it so much. It is so just wholesome. There is a tea cupboard in the House at the Edge of Magic that if you touch the handle, everyone turns into random things like a gelatinous blob. And there is, Eric is a creature that lives at the house. He doesn't speak in more than 2 syllables, and my heart just, I love that character so goddamn much. There is a toilet on the run, and you've got some troublesome witches. It is everything I love about middle grade, and being joyous whilst dealing with serious themes. Like, there is an alcoholic in here, briefly, finding a sense of home when you have been in a situation where you're no longer with the family you were supposed to be with, and it's just so lovely. It really is such a wonderful series, so I'm so happy to have finished it off, and sad because I want more, but also it was beautiful. The next book that I read was Wings of Ebony by JL, and I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. It was very interesting reading this alongside the next book that I'm going to talk about, because there was a lot of comparisons and there was two very similar names. I cannot tell you the name from this one because it just has gone and been replaced by the other one. This deals with some heavy themes where our protagonist is split between two worlds, and her world in Houston is currently undergoing so much racial violence. Rue wants to protect her home, but she's also whisked away to this magical world of Gaizon, where she's learning about her magic and her dad, and there's definitely a lot going on and a lot that's addressed, and I really appreciate it for it. It was exceptionally well done in navigating that dynamics. I just felt that the magic wasn't overly explained. There was a bit of confusion towards particular elements to it, and Rue's head fastness, just the teenage angst, phasing out of being able to read it. I understand 100%. She's so passionate about her home and making sure everyone in her neighborhood is safe. Jesus, guys, kids, communicate. I understand that people in positions of power are actively working against you. I understand. I can't fault them. But there were just moments. There was a decision that was made that could have potentially gone another way and still had the same resolution. The way that it could have gone wouldn't have been in line with this character. So I'm happy that it followed true to form. It's just like, oh, okay. Yeah, but I am very excited to read the second one and see where we tie off this duology, because there is definitely a lot going on in it. And then the last book that I read for this 3 in 3 was Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. I'm giving it a 4.5 stars. So, one thing we learned, if I'm reading fantasy series, I'm going to give the endings 4.5 stars apparently. Again, similar to Girl in the Tower, I didn't read a recap, and whilst I only read Kingdom of Copper in April, my headspace wasn't the best, and I acknowledged that when reviewing it, but I struggled to remember who was who for the first 200 pages. But once we got into it, it was good. Again, me problem, not the book problem. I know that these series are beloved and they are exceptionally well written. My brain just can't handle a spoonful of intelligence at the moment. But, oh my god, Nari, my soul, Ali, just oh my god, I cannot comprehend these characters. I cannot comprehend how expansive this grew in the third book. I am shooketh to my core, and it was exceptionally well done. I had such a glorious time. There were particular elements where I knew I was supposed to be more emotional than I was currently feeling, and I put that into this space that I was in, and that's totally fine, because reading is subjective to the moment that you're in. But I also didn't want to rate the book lower because of my own brain space, if that makes sense. This world is just so beautiful. And Drumshed is apparently in this as well, because I cannot remember the character's name from this, only from Empire of God, which, you know, speaks volumes for how my brain is. Holy dooly. What an ending. The one thing I think that really had an impact on my rating for this though was how everything wrapped up, because obviously don't want to spoil it. I don't know, because I haven't edited the footage for this yet, what I'm going to say in my vlog, but for one particular character, I appreciate how it was done. It was masterfully crafted, but it wasn't a big bang, and I was on the edge of my seat waiting for this big bang the entire time. Still a bang, definitely, for sure. Many bangs, lots of bangs, there's guns, but this one particular element just took me by surprise. And I can finally articulate it, so I'm going to message it to Jacqueline to let her know why my brain went the way that it did. And I'm so glad I could talk this out. But I've been talking for too long. Let's wrap up this wrap up. Oh dear lord. So I have placed the book before that I own for the series backwards, just to give you an indicator of the pages that they should be, although it is still not entirely accurate. How did I read this much in a month? Oh my god! How did I read this much in a month? That's the pile. It literally comes up to my chest when sitting. What the sweet lord. Please let me know in the comments any thoughts, feelings and or opinions on any of the books that I've read this month, and if you're excited to see the 3 in 3 vlog, which is what I've been dubbing it, that will be coming out in a few weeks. There's 5 hours of footage I have to edit. But anyway, let me know any of your thoughts and feelings on how your reading went in June, or any of thoughts that you have on the books that I have read. And yeah, anything else you want to let me know, leave it in the comments down below. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!